regret that you took that job? Yeah, I've experienced that myself with the toxic environment. You know, over the years, when you're young, is that you don't know any better, as perhaps you always think that people are treated bad at the workplace. But it's not until you work at a really good job that you realize that those other turkeys were treating you bad. So I've got some advice for you. It's a strategy. It might or might not work for you. But it's a way that you could perhaps avoid making a mistake. So I was working at this one job. I was at this job for 18 months. And it was a good job. It was good people. When I say a good job, I mean the pay was fine. I was bored out of my mind. All my skills were not being used, but the people were really nice. It was a really pleasant working environment. And so I tried to redefine my role at that job. And my supervisor, of course, supported that, but due to the lack of leadership in the upper portions of the organization, it just wasn't going to happen. It wasn't anything against me. It's just that these people were too busy engaging in scandal. So I saw this opportunity for another job in another state that I actually wanted. It was a nearby state. It was an adjacent state that I wanted to move to. And it looked like a really good fit, on paper at least. A lot of times when you apply for a job, you look for the organization, the type of work, the compensation, etc., where it is, and all that. But one of the problems, ultimately, though, is you really don't know what it's like to work there until you work there. And you want to avoid a toxic environment, because I've worked in toxic environments before. I've worked in really great environments, and you don't really appreciate how toxic a situation can be until you realize how good you had it at another location. So I applied, interviewed, and I got accepted. I got offered the position, resigned from my position, gave them 2 weeks' notice. It's interesting that employers can terminate you at will, but you have to give them 2 weeks' notice. That's just simply not fair. That kind of ties into the advice I've got. So I started this job, and from the very first day, I realized that I had made a mistake. And, my supervisor, upon meeting me, was just a horrible person. And I'm thinking that, and I didn't do anything. I mean, I can probably make some inappropriate remarks throughout my life occasionally, but, they didn't know me, so it's not like I'd made any. But I was treated really bad, and and it just ended up getting worse. And I could tell by looking around that this type of behavior was tolerated. So, it did not take long for me to realize that the agency was screwed up. So anyway, from the very first day, this supervisor treated me, really bad. I mean, to the point that, just almost ignored my presence. You're in the honeymoon phase when you first start a job, and, you'd at least be able to treat me as kindly as you did when I was interviewing. And so it just continued to get worse. And the mere fact that this supervisor was employed there was an indication of the type of culture which existed in that organization. And it's not going to get better. Accidents don't happen. And the fact is that entire organization was an infection, a virus. And so I regretted leaving the place that I did. And now, within about 3 or 4 months after working at that job, I actually got recruited and left. But nevertheless, what did I learn from this? Well, number one is that first, try to make peace with your current employer. Is that before you try looking elsewhere. I mean, I did. I tried to find another position in the agency. It wasn't the people that was the problem. It was the work itself. I was underutilized, and if that doesn't go anywhere, then you will have to look elsewhere. But the challenge was, though, is that you really don't know what an organization is like until you actually work there. You could look at reviews on Glassdoor, and that's problematic, because it's not always anonymous, or people could figure out who it was, and so there ought to be some type of scoring system. So what I learned from this is that what you should do is, what I should have done is I should have, taken a leave of absence from my current employer, or I went on vacation, and then started this new job. And if that new job sucked, and you'll know it within a week, then you just quit, go back to your old job. And no one will be any wiser. Of course, the challenge is that your current employer might actually be a reference. So it's perhaps maybe another way of handling this is perhaps an alternative way. Is you don't want to be deceitful, is that maybe have this discussion with your current employer. Look, I'd like to go here, and I really want to have that type of job here, but I want to go someplace else only because of that. So I'd like to try this place out. What do you think about that? And this way you're upfront and not hiding anything. Because there's nothing worse than working in a toxic workplace. And they exist no matter what HR tells you. So, and along those lines, when it comes to HR, they're not looking out for your interests. They're looking out for the employer's interest. So, everything you tell HR is going to find its way back. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it is. So, the takeaway here is, number one is try to avoid toxic environments. Number two is, if you're working in a great place, but it's just not fulfilling your needs, then try to make something out of it there. And then third is that always see if you can have some type of retreat opportunity to go back to your original job, if you can find some way to do that. Because now that I'm retired, I look back on my career, and there were some really bad workplace situations, hostile environments, toxic situations. And those were permitted, and those are always going to be somehow permitted, despite the law. Because when you have to give 2 weeks' notice to your employer, but the employer can fire you any day, that's unequal, it's unfair. And so there's no surprise that, HR cannot be trusted. So avoid toxic environments. Life is too short for that. Hope this helps. See you next time.